We now return to our main topic, the extraordinary EU summit on defense and Ukraine. Europe wants to be ready for any threats coming from Russia. It also wants to help Ukraine, which is facing a brutal Russian invasion. And now joining me to discuss the current status of the ceasefire and peace talks, as well as the ambitions of the EU to drastically increase its own defense capabilities, is the former chief negotiator for Poland's EU accession, Jan Truszczyński. Good evening, sir, and thank you very much for joining us on World News Tonight.
Good evening.
Now, concerning support for Ukraine coming out of this summit there in Brussels, the EU failed to provide anything concrete today. It did not provide 5 billion euros, which was requested by Ukraine to purchase 2 million artillery shells. Do you think that Europe, I mean, it's expressed its support, its ongoing support for Ukraine, but do you think Europe is kind of in a wait-and-see type mode right now with Ukraine and a potential ceasefire that might be just around the corner?
Well, absolutely not. First of all, this is the regular summit, not extraordinary. It handles many different subjects, starting with the first discussion on the size and shape and structure of the next long-term budget. It has already been looking at Europe's external competitiveness. It looks at many other issues, and indeed the issue of European defense, following upon the release yesterday of the Commission's white paper on the future of European defense, is one of the issues, one of the subjects. But according to the best of my knowledge, this topic has not yet been handled in today's discussions. Its moment will come, but not yet. As to Ukraine, obviously there will be a set of conclusions regarding Ukraine and collaboration that Europe has with Ukraine, and it apparently will again have to be signed by 26 heads of state and government. It will be a resounding expression of support for Ukraine in the current predicament, in the current circumstances, but it will not be tantamount to any specific decisions regarding the supply of ammunition, supply of other material, supply of hardware that Ukraine needs to continue its defense against Russia. Be that as it may, it is certainly another meeting of European leaders, which will be very supportive of Ukraine and of European links with that country.
I'd like to turn the attention now to the Putin-Trump phone call that just took place a couple days ago. Putin only making limited steps towards a ceasefire on energy infrastructure and at sea, and also calling on the U.S. and its allies to stop all assistance for Kyiv. Now, what are the most likely steps for Trump? Is it more carrots, or potentially now maybe the stick for Russia to get it to this, at least to the 30-day ceasefire that Ukraine has agreed to?
Well, I suppose that Mr. Trump keeps asking himself that question, and if not him, then certainly people who are in charge, Rubio, Waltz, Witkoff, and perhaps also others. The next round of talks in Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia, is already scheduled. There should be some substance discussed. So it remains really to be seen with what kind of luggage will the Americans go to those talks. Well, what has until now transpired from the first discussion between Putin and Trump does not really encourage anyone. Certainly, it is not something that inspires us in Europe or our Ukrainian friends with hope that this is the right avenue, and that following down that lane will allow to reap early success. Depends very much on how heavily will Mr. Trump and his entourage decide to lean on Russia, because without additional pressure on Russia, and real meaningful pressure, that's hard to see how Russia could be forced to come to the negotiating table, discussion, not yet negotiations really, with something a bit more productive than their first bid. Their first bid is obviously something to be totally rejected.
Certainly, and Vladimir Putin also called for Donald Trump to take over Ukraine's nuclear power stations. Donald Trump talking with Zelensky just yesterday and talking about ownership of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is Europe's largest. We've seen the tensions mount over this dangerous situation where the Russians occupy the nuclear power plant. Could this be a potential solution for the Americans to either invest or have some kind of stake in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to put fears of any type of damage to that facility at bay?
While Zaporizhzhia plant is huge, and while it has been very important for the supply of the entire country and its industry in power, it is certainly not the first and foremost issue on the minds of our Ukrainian friends. What they are looking to are guarantees and commitments from Russia, allowing to believe that Russians are likely to accept reasonable, fair conditions of a ceasefire. Now, talking about who is to operate and who is to effectively own the operation of Zaporizhzhia will hopefully perhaps be one of the many, many issues to be handled when the real negotiations come, if they come. But it is certainly not the first and foremost, and it is certainly not the key to meaningful progress over the entire front of issues that need to be discussed and agreed upon.
Certainly. Now, President Zelensky also said that Ukraine cannot end the war along the front lines. He told Donald Trump that that would lead to a Berlin Wall type situation. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, these are Zelensky's words, but indeed, if there should be a ceasefire to be observed not only by Ukraine, but above all by Russia, then the two countries would have to be separated by a tightly controlled and patrolled and effectively managed line separating Ukraine from its territories that were put under the management by the Russian aggressor. It will have to be something closer to other similar lines that we have seen in the past, not just Berlin Wall, but also the 37th parallel in Korea, also up to a point the Green Line bisecting the island of Cyprus, the Republic of Cyprus, from the northern part of the island. This sort of thing, indeed. Yes, it will have to be something that is not just a line on the map or a line on the ground. It will have to be managed by a meaningful military presence.
All right, seems like we're still a bit away from that. Former chief negotiator for Poland's EU accession, Jan Truszczyński, thank you very much for joining me tonight, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.